Hello students, welcome to your social studies class. Students, today we will study history, chapter number 3, in the earliest cities. In this chapter, we will do the following topics, which include the story of Harappa, houses, streets and drains, life and craft in the city, raw materials and food for the people, Harappan towns in Gujarat, and the end of the earliest cities. So let us proceed with the explanation of the chapter. The story of Harappa. Nearly 150 years ago, when railway lines were being laid down for the first time in the Punjab, engineers stumbled upon a site of Harappa in present day Pakistan. To them, it seemed like a mold that was rich source of ready-made, high-quality bricks. So they carried off thousands of bricks from the walls of those old buildings to, to build the railway lines. Many buildings were completely destroyed. Then, about 100 years ago, archaeologists found the site and realized that this was one of the oldest cities in the subcontinent. As this was the first city to be discovered, all other sites were from the similar buildings were found and were described as Harappan. These cities developed about 4700 years ago. Many of these cities were divided into two or more parts. Usually, the upper part to the west was smaller but higher. Archaeologists described this as the citadel. Generally, the part to the west to the east was larger but lower, and this was called the lower town. Very often, walls of baked brick were built around each part. The bricks were so well made that they have lasted for thousands of years. The bricks were laid in an interlocking pattern which made the walls even stronger. In some cities, special buildings were constructed on the citadel. For example, in Mohenjo-daro, a special tank, which archaeologists called the Great Bath, was built in this area. This was lined with bricks coated with plaster and made watertight with a layer of natural tar. There were steps leading down to it from both the sides, while there were rooms on all the sides as well. Water was probably brought in from a well and drained out after use. Perhaps important people took a dip in this tank on special occasions. Can you all see this picture in front of you? This picture depicts the Great Bath from Mohenjo-daro. Other cities like Kalibangal and Lothal had fire altars where sacrifices may have been performed. In some cities like Mohenjo-daro, Harappa, and Lothal, elaborate storehouses were also found. Houses, streets, and drains. Generally, houses were built either one or two storied with rooms all around the courtyard or the veranda. Most houses had a separate bathing area and some had wells to supply water as well. Many of the cities were well covered with had well covered drains. Notice how carefully they were laid out in straight lines. Can you see these? Drain. These were the drainage which were well covered by the bricks. Although you cannot see it, each drain had a gentle slope so that water could flow through it. Very often, drains in houses were connected to those on the streets and smaller drains led to bigger ones. As the drains were covered, inspection holes were provided at intervals to clean them. All three houses, drains, and streets were well planned and built at the same time. Now let us have a look at the life of the people living in the city. The Harappan city was a very busy place. There were people who planned construction of special buildings. They were called the rulers. It is likely that the rulers used to send people to far away lands to get metal, precious stones, and other important things which they wanted. They may have kept the most valuable objects, such as ornaments of gold and silver or beautiful beads, for themselves. And there were scribes, people who knew the art of writing, who helped the rulers prepare the seal, perhaps wrote on other materials that may have not survived because of time. Besides, there were men and women, craft persons, making all kinds of things, either in their own homes or in special workshops. People were traveling to distant lands or returning with raw material and perhaps stories as well. Many terracotta, which is a type of clay, toys have been found, and a long time children must have played with them. New crafts in the city. Most of the things that have been found by the archaeologists are made of stone, shell, and metal, including copper, bronze, gold, and silver. Copper and bronze were used to make tools, weapons, ornaments, and vessels. Gold and silver were used to make ornaments and vessels. Perhaps the most striking finds are of those beads, weights, and the blades. The Harappans also made seals out of stone. These were generally rectangular and usually have an animal carved on them. The Harappans also made pots with beautiful black designs. Cotton was probably grown at Mehergarh, about which we have already studied in chapter number 2, about 7,000 years ago. Actual pieces of cloth were found attached to the lid of the silver vase and some copper objects at Mohenjo-daro. Archaeologists have also found spindle whorls, which were used for weaving, which were made up of terracotta and faience. These were used to spin thread. Many of the things that were produced were probably the work of the specialist. Who is a specialist? Specialist is a person who is trained to do only one kind of work. For example, cutting stone or polishing beads or carving seals, etc. We do not know whether only men were specialists or only women were specialists. Perhaps it is believed that some men and women may have been specialists. In search of raw material. Raw materials are substances that are either found naturally or are produced by farmers or herders. For example, wood, ores, metals, grains, etc. These raw materials are then processed to produce final goods. For example, cotton, which is produced by farmers, is a raw material that is processed to make a cloth. While some of the raw materials that the Harappans used were available locally, many items such as copper, tin, gold, silver, and precious stones had to be brought from distant places. The Harappans probably got copper from present-day Rajasthan and even from Oman in West Asia. Tin, which is mixed with copper to produce bronze, may have been brought from present-day Afghanistan and Iran. Gold could have been come all the way from present-day Karnataka, and precious stones from present-day Gujarat, Iran, and Afghanistan. Food for people in the city. While many people lived in cities, others living in the countryside grew crops and reared animals. These farmers and herders supplied food to craft persons, scribes, and rulers in the cities. We know from remains of plants that the Harappans grew wheat, barley, pulses, peas, rice, sesame, linseed, and mustard. A new tool called the plow was used to dig the earth for turning the soil and planting the seeds. While real plows, which were probably made up of wood, have not survived, the toy models of plow have been found. As this region does not have heavy rainfall, some form of irrigation may have been used. This means that water was stored and supplied to the fields when the plants were growing. The Harappans reared cattle, sheep, goat, and buffalo. Water and pastures were available around settlements. However, in the dry summer months, large herds of animals were probably taken to greater distances in search of grass and water. They also collected fruits like bear, caught fish, and hunted wild animals like the antelope. Harappan towns in Gujarat. The city of Dholavira was located on Khadir Bait in the run of Kutch, where there was fresh water and fertile soil. Unlike some of the Harappan cities, which were divided into two parts, Dholavira is the only Harappan town which is divided into three parts, and each part was surrounded with massive stone walls with entrances through gateways. There was also a large open area in the settlement where public ceremonies could be held. Other finds include large letters in the Harappan script that were carved out of stone and perhaps inlaid in wood. This unique finding is generally the Harappan writing have been found on small objects such as seals. The city of Lothal stood beside a tributary of Sabarmati in Gujarat, close to the Gulf of Khambat. It was situated near areas where raw materials such as semi-precious stones were easily available. This was an important center for making objects out of stone, shell, and metal. There were many storehouses in the city as well. Many seals and ceilings were found in the storehouse. A building that was found here was probably a workshop for making beads, pieces of stone, half made beads, tools for bead making, and finished beads have all been found from the city of Lothal. End of the earliest cities. How and when do we realize that the earliest cities had ended? It is believed that around 3,900 years ago, we find the beginning of a major change. People stopped living in cities, writing seals and weights were no longer in use. Raw materials brought from long distances became very rare. In Mohenjo-daro, we find that garbage piled up on the streets, the drainage system broke down, and new but less impressive houses were built, and even over the streets. Why did this all happen? We are not sure about it. Some scholars suggest that the rivers dried up. Others suggested that there were deforestation. This could have happened because fuel was required for baking bricks and for smelting copper ores. Besides, grazing by large herds of cattle, sheep, and goat may have destroyed the green cover of that area. In some of the areas, there can be floods, but none of the reasons can explain the end of these earlier cities. Flooding or river drying up could have been one of the cities, one of the reasons for the earlier cities to end. So students, this was about a quick explanation of the chapter. Let us have a look at few of the questions. You all are requested to go through the reading of this chapter and solve these questions in the notebook. Thank you.